In today's video, we have a big signing to discuss in the Montreal Canadiens organization. We have a couple more players that have converted their PTOs into NHL contracts. Plus, we have a ton more players on NHL waivers. Will we see any claims? We'll discuss the possibilities coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of news to talk about here today, including a ton of players on NHL waivers. As we've talked about over the past few days, this is very common and expected this time of year as NHL teams go through their training camp and start to cut down their rosters. Many players need waivers to be assigned to their minor league affiliates. Of course, in some cases, players are on waivers for other reasons, but this time of year, that's generally what we see. You do get the occasional claim, but there's really generally not a whole lot. Like we saw the Coyotes claim a goaltender the other day in Jonas Johansson. We might see the odd one, but as I mentioned before, I think we'll see maybe a few more claims closer to the start of the season as some higher quality players, will say, are made available through the waiver wire. Of course, as they, players with more than rookie experience after they reach their exemption levels, then certainly they'll need waivers to go back and forth. So obviously we have a lot of players on waivers today, including a bunch from Vegas: goaltender Michael Hutchison, Braden Paschal, Byron Froese, and Sheldon Rempel. I wonder, maybe Hutchison might be interesting to some teams if there's a NHL team out there. We know there's probably a few that are considering adding another, third or fourth string goaltender who can basically mostly play in their minor league in the American Hockey League, but somebody with enough experience they feel comfortable calling up in a tight situation from time to time. I wonder if Hutchison maybe gets claimed, but I'm not going to say that there's a high probability. But out of all the players on waivers today, he's probably the most likely. But there's also another veteran goalie in that situation as well, which is Louis Domingue from the New York Rangers. I wonder if we could see either guy get picked up. I think in some cases teams are probably trying to be somewhat strategic, you could say, when they place certain players on waivers to kind of reduce the chances of them getting picked up. We also have a few players from the Winnipeg Jets, including Ashton Sautner, Jeff Malott, Leon Galwanka, Michael Eyssimont. And from St. Louis, we have Nathan Todd, Luke Bukowski, and Steven Santini. From the Edmonton Oilers, we have Seth Griffin. Tampa Bay has Sean Day, and the Montreal Canadiens have Nathan Schnarr. All these players are available on waivers and will be available until noon Eastern time tomorrow, which we'll find out if there were any waiver claims or not. Yesterday we had a ton of players on waivers as well, and they all cleared, so there were no waiver claims to discuss here today. Now, as I mentioned, we also have a few signings to discuss. A couple of players have converted and made good on PTOs, getting themselves an NHL contract. We'll start with the Anaheim Ducks and defenseman Nathan Beaulieu. He gets signed on a one-year deal valued at $850,000. Of course, the Ducks, you could say, certainly wanted to add some veteran help on the back end and decided to invite Beaulieu in on a PTO. Of course, we knew there was likely a spot there, and if he impressed enough, they might give him a chance rather than probably put a younger defenseman there that maybe isn't quite ready. So Beaulieu goes and makes good. He can certainly be a serviceable third pair guy. He's willing to be physical, drop the gloves. No, I wouldn't give him too big of a role, but I think he'll be fine there. And the Carolina Hurricanes have signed Calvin DeHaan on a one-year deal valued at $850,000. So same deal for both players, both one-year, one-way deals. Both veteran players should be able to fit in. Of course, Calvin DeHaan, actually the contract that he had that just expired was actually signed with Carolina. Started his career with the Islanders, which is where he spent the bulk of the time in the NHL so far. Became a free agent. It was obvious at that point that there really wasn't any room on the Islanders roster. They were looking to move on. He had battled a lot of knee injuries during his time there, and certainly I think it's fair to say that maybe not quite as strong of a defenseman as he was earlier in his career, and it was definitely just time for a change for both parties. Went to Carolina, signed a 4-year free agent contract, and after the first year ended up getting traded to Chicago. And of course now that deal's expired, and he ends up back with Carolina on the PTO and now signed. Of course, Jake Gardner's injury, ending back on LTIR, and is basically gone for the year, probably done for his career, to be honest. That certainly help matters here a little bit. There's word that Ethan Baird would prefer a trade to get a bigger role. So I certainly needed some veteran, insurance back there in the back end. And DeHaan certainly was impressive enough to get a contract. Now, the other bigger signing today, the biggest news of all this, really was the Montreal Canadiens extending goaltender Jake Allen. Of course, Jake is now the primary goaltender in the Habs organization, now that we know that Carey Price will not play this season. And based on this move, I think it's also fair to say that they are not expecting Carey Price to play again. I know the Habs have not said that. I don't believe Carey Price has said that. And I'm not really sure if and when they're going to. But a lot of these subsequent moves that this team has made since we found out that Price wouldn't play this year seems pretty clear to me that he's not really in the future plans. I guess at this point, if something happens, I'm sure they'll welcome him back, obviously. But this is giving Jake a nice raise. I've seen some comments on social media today questioning the AAV. He gets a 2-year deal valued at $3.85 million. In year one, he gets $4.4 million with a $500,000 signing bonus and a 7-team no-trade clause. And in year two, he actually takes home $3.3 million. And out of that is a $1 million signing bonus and a 3-team no trade. So a small modified no trade. To me, that's certainly justifiable for a veteran guy. But the thing here is that when he came from St. Louis, of course, he was making a bit more money. And then he took a lower valued contract on a couple years extension and he get from Marc Bergevin. But he was also expected to be the backup goaltender. At that point, you could say he was the highest paid backup goalie in the NHL. And the Habs certainly had a fair bit of money tied up in their goaltending duo between Price and Allen. But at the same time, he was also, probably out of all the backup goaltenders in the NHL, one of the few who was capable of being a starter. He was a starter for a while in St. Louis, lost his job to Binnington. Of course, they went on to win the Stanley Cup, so he'd had to take a back seat, continue to be a good teammate, good pro, and be a backup. And to me, he actually flourished in the role, and he actually found his game and kind of settled in as a backup in St. Louis for the last probably year and a half that he was there. And at times he had to play a little bit more when Binnington wasn't available or hurt or whatever. But to me, he was kind of did better and kind of impressed enough to have a team like Montreal want to pick him up to be more of a tandem with Carey Price. That was expected in the beginning that because of his ability to play more games and of his experience, Stanley Cup champion, former starting goaltender, that Carey Price wouldn't have to play quite so much and they could lighten his load a little bit, really strengthening the position. Now, at least that was the plan. And of course, it wasn't long into this that Carey Price started getting hurt. Of course, he went on to play in the playoffs when they went on to run to the final. And then since he has been out, missed most of last year, except for a handful of games trying to come back. And now he's basically done. So Jake's going to be the go-to guy here, the starter, along with Samuel Montembeault in the short term. And I think with the extension they gave to Caden Primo, to me it looks pretty clear that they're expecting to go with Allen and Primo, or at least they're hoping to. I think probably after this year we'll have to wait and see. But to me this is a real good deal for Jake. It's hard to say where things go for his career from here. It's going to take him to his he's in his early 30s now. It's going to take him more into his mid 30s. Will he continue playing after that, or will he have to take a smaller role? It's certainly difficult to say, but he's capable of being a good goaltender that give them a chance to win as the Habs go through this rebuild. And I think he'll flourish in the role. Sometimes the stats don't really look as good as he can play because of the team in front of him, especially over the last year or so as the Habs struggled last year. But, he gave them a good chance, and to me, earned himself this extension. And we'll see. I think at least they have their goaltending sorted out for the future. And I think this answers a few questions for us as well, like I said, about the future of Carey Price. And between the Primo extension that they already gave out, I think kind of answers our longer-term solutions on Samuel Montembeault as well. But of course, things can always change. So let me know your thoughts on the Jake Allen extension to Montreal, the other guys getting their PTOs flipped into regular contracts, and do you think we'll see any waiver claims? Talk about it in the comments. We'll talk about it further down there. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.